Okay. So where we are on the one. It's always said that when a person recognizes that that given Hashem's greatness, nothing we do really reaches. No matter how great we are, it never truly reaches His greatness. We serve a king on the basis of how great He is, and Hashem is infinitely great, and therefore our service is always it's always since we're finite, there's always something missing in our service. And this is and we're in the middle of the second to the last page. I wish there were page numbers on these things with the words that Gam Tzaddik Gomer, even a perfectly great tzaddik, from Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom, like Moshe Rabbeinu of blessed memory, would have to say vidui during Aseres Yemei Tshuva. You have it? You know what? It's right by note number 10. It's like 4 lines. If you find note number 10 in chapter 13, if you find not the note itself, but you find the notation for number 10 in chapter 13, you'll see that we're like 6 lines up from there. So look for the little number 10. Yeah, I think in the future I'm going to print these up in only one copy and then write pages on them. I don't know why they don't. Right, so it's here. See, it's the words a complete tzaddik, chapter 13.
12 and 13?
I believe I just gave you just 13. That's the introduction to them, but there's a separate one for 13 here. Right. Right, so there's a bunch of 13s and a bunch of 14s. There we are. Okay, so we're in chapter 13, right near note 10. The words are a complete tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu Michal, if you want to put it up. Here.
Towards the end.
But it's her notes on there. Right there. Yeah, so I'm gonna do pages next time. Okay. So even a complete tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu, blessed memory, if he was alive nowadays, he would have to say Vidya service to make sure. Why? Because even Moshe's service is incomplete, because the finite to the infinite is incomplete. Because the light of God's true greatness, even a perfect service is considered a sin. And we don't mean a sin, we mean lacking. We mean falling short of what Hashem is worthy of, because Hashem is infinite, and therefore He's worthy of an infinite level of service. This is what the Chazal say, that Moshe bowed to the ground. When he saw the, what did he bow for? Why did he bow? Midas emes ra, he saw the truth, and the truth is that even Moshe never comes up to this level of, and this is at the time of the golden calf. But when what is Moshe bow? Because he sees that there's no limit to the truth of Hashem, and therefore whatever you do falls short of it, because who can stand before God's truth is explained elsewhere. Right. So Korach, he fell down because he felt that the Jewish people kept testing Hashem, kept failing. No, that was out of despair. Here it was out of a recognition of Hashem's greatness and therefore his own smallness. There it was a problem with the shortcomings of the Jewish people. Here it was about his own shortcomings, because as great as he was, he's nothing compared to Hashem. But it's a very good question. There it was here it's about himself. There it's about the Jewish people. Because he feels he can't advocate for them anymore. As explained elsewhere. A pasuk shuri kesav, where you bring an ox or a sheep, and later it discusses even a meal offering, that when Hashem demands, he only demands according to man's potential. It's true that we should understand that no matter how great we are, we're still infinitely away from Hashem, as everyone else is. But at the same time, a person shouldn't get too discouraged, because we understand that Hashem, who created us, understands our limitations. So even though we know there's an infinite journey to traverse between us and Hashem, we also know that Hashem only demands of us. A man who can afford an ox brings an ox. A man who affords a sheep brings a sheep. A man who can afford a pigeon brings a pigeon. Someone who can afford only a handful of flour brings a handful of flour. Because commensurate with Hashem's true greatness, there is no service that truly matches Hashem's greatness that a finite human being in a body can do, or even in a neshama. So Hashem only asks that it be according to the standards of the truth appropriate for that individual. In other words, a person should honestly evaluate what they're capable of. What you should feel about your work is one thing. What Hashem demands of you is what you're capable of doing at that moment. So there has to be a balance. On one hand, Hashem only wants from you what you can do. On the other hand, you should understand that you can't be satisfied, because no matter where you go, there's always more to do. So you have to have that balance. On one hand, not to be satisfied where you are. On the other hand, to accept that what Hashem demands of you is what you're capable of at the moment. Nevertheless, when a person meditates on how far, because everyone, even Moshe, can meditate on how far they are from Hashem, it creates a certain bitterness in his soul. And certainly, when he contemplates that his work in keeping Torah mitzvahs may not be according to his truth. In other words, we may be falling short of our own standards, of what we're ourselves capable of, as mentioned before. And all the more so if a person, in the middle of a person's divine service, extraneous thoughts occur to him. And sometimes you find actions of speech or action that were not directed to Hashem. And all the more so actual sins, that through this you're very different from Hashem. And this could make you very embittered and cry out bitterly because of his awesome distance from Hashem. And this, of course, isn't the goal. The goal is not to remain bitter, but a person does have to know where they're falling short. And in doing so, you understand that you're the sense of self-importance, that you're better than everyone else in your service of Hashem, goes away. Because the moment you understand where you are, you understand you have so much to fix, you have no business negating someone else. If you were perfect, so maybe it's your place to negate someone else. Since none of us is perfect, we don't have to negate, and we don't have any reason to negate anyone else, because the sense that a false sense of perfection enables you to look down on someone else. If you're worried about your own issues and understand that what Hashem wants is according to us, which means that doubtless we'll find some way in which we're falling short of where we should be. So that takes away the sense of superiority that creates this whole problem.
I could see where the falling in bitterness would be perhaps where some people would want to go in their agenda to become better. But in another way, you see this as like, thank God that I had the opportunity to just keep on working on something, because when we think we have reached a level where our work is complete, then we can become complicit and therefore find that you sort of lack meaning and purpose, and when you lack meaning and purpose, you can become depressed and feel like what's the point on living? But to have that work in front of you constantly is a really complacent.
But also if a person has the other problem that they don't know where they honestly are, and therefore feel unhappy about where you're holding, and you give up, that's also not good. In other words, bitterness is designed, as you said, to make us feel that we have the ability to improve. That's the difference between bitterness and not clinical, but that's what's the state of depression,
Sure.
the state of sadness, where I sort of give up. Here, the sense is that I have the ability to change. So it ultimately comes to simcha, as discussed in Yigeres HaTshuva. But this point over here is that if one does an honest self-evaluations, even if you're Moshe Rabbeinu, you would understand that you have a distance to go, just as the other person. So why are you better than him? So this should take away the sense, and more than that. So because this is the truth, we understand sometimes that our negation of another person's avoda is like the story with the Rebbe Rashab, whose older Rebbe Rashab was very tall, his older brother was short. So even when they were little, they were about the same height. So one day the Rebbe Marash comes out and sees the Rebbe Rashab's crying. They were like 4 years old. His older brother was 6. Because his older brother dug a hole in the mud. Lubavitch, all the streets were mud. And he put him in the hole, so he should be taller. So the Marash told Zalman Aron, he told him that the way that find something to stand on to make yourself taller, don't put the other person lower. And the idea, of course, is that that a lot of this is in other words, if you can feel instead of fixing yourself by feeling superior to the other person in the service of Hashem, so you're better, so you're in a good place. Whereas once you understand that we all have this great distance to traverse, we all have things that we need to fix. So in other words, when someone needs something, you should think of the other person. When it comes to your own service of Hashem, you should think about yourself and not compare yourself to the other person. Because also you might say, oh, this person does all these wonderful things, and I don't. But maybe you don't have the opportunity. So the important thing is emes, is true, is to acknowledge where you have to be and what you have to do, because not all of us have the same avoda at the same time. So this is all.
But instead of feeling bitter, dude, I'm looking at it from a positive standpoint. Like you should feel like you can strive to do.
Well, bitterness is an introduction. Yeah. Bitterness is an introduction to change. It's not a sense of despair.
Okay.
Bitterness is
that puts it in a different perspective.
Right. That's in other words, bitterness is a positive thing. It merely means that I see what needs to be fixed, and then I can fix it. So this is the two ways by which a person can come closer to Hashem. And the second way if a person is feeling senses of superiority or resentment from another person, the second approach is most appropriate, because this is the best way to get rid of a sense of negation of the other. And the reason is because once you get to this trait of emes, of truth, once you get to a place of truth, so that already is that's the trait of Moshe, and that's the competition to the trait of Midian. That's the negation. Because again, remember, we're not talking about actual desires. We're talking about an attitude that comes from a sense of self-importance, which in turn may be a sense of feeling good about yourself by negating the other, by not being honest about where you are. So now we're going to discuss, now that we know sort of what some of the solutions are, we're going to revisit the problem of yeshus. The problem, again, of yeshus is a sense of self-fulfillment and self-importance. Yeshus is a sense of basically, yesh means is. So I'm here, and everything else, even my understanding of Hashem and certainly other people, have to revolve around the sense that of my permanence, I'm the fulcrum, I'm the center. That's what Yeshua says. Other people could be very important. Hashem could be very important. But my yardstick, the fulcrum that everything's revolving around is me. And when I make the I of myself, of my own self, the center of everything, even though that's in itself not a particular Avera, it's much harder to get rid of. It brings to all kinds of problems. So, and now he's going to say that Yeshus can even creep into this avoda of humility. Even this avoda of humility, which should get rid of our negation of the other. Nevertheless, these two levels in other words, Yeshus lies so deep because we're born with Yeshus. The sense that we're the center of the world, every baby has, and we never completely lose it. So the Yeshus is the deepest klipa, it's the deepest problem, and it can affect even these two levels of avoda we spoke about earlier. So even if we get to this point where we are aware of our shortcomings, we might not have yet gotten rid of Yeshus. So in these chapters, we'll read the introduction. The Rebbe Rashab Yisrael Yeshus contained to personal service and create discord between individuals within a community. Explain that even when serves with God, it is possible for service to be self-oriented. It's possible that one may ultimately seek his own satisfaction. To avoid this problem, one needs to cultivate an approach of it. Similarly, even avodah inspired by humility and anguish can be tainted by yeshus. Deep down, a person may feel a certain sense of gratification from the very fact that he has come to experience the humility and anguish. Moreover, seek to make himself greater by disparaging others. When he sees someone else's success, whether in divine service or material matters, instead of being happy to him, he's envious. True, the Rebbe Rashab says envy can be positive if you envy someone's accomplishments in service of Hashem, but only when service is characterized by bittul, where there's a sense of self-abnegation, where there's a sense that I'm not the center of everything, that Hashem is. So then you see someone else with a good quality, you envy it and you want to acquire it. At this point, the Rebbe Rashab distinguishes between yeshus and other character flaws. A typical character flaw is associated with a specific negative quality, a product of one of the 7 impure motive attributes, right, which is the 7 nations of Canaan. Such a flaw can be corrected, even transformed and channeled positively for use in the realm of holiness. By contrast, yeshus is a comprehensive failing that drags a person away from holiness altogether. So now he's going to answer the questions that he begin with the Maimah. Why do you need Moshe? Why is this different from the other nations that didn't need Moshe to defeat them? Now, the preceding 2 chapters describe chapter 14, 2 modes of divine service, one emphasizing joy and one on humility. A person practicing either of the mentioned approaches to avodah may still be blemished by yeshus and coarseness. Coarseness means to say insensitivity. And coarseness is insensitivity to where one should be and how one should feel. That's a product of yeshus. I believe the Kotzker said that the smallest organ that you have power over is your little finger. But if you place your little fingers in front of the pupils of your eyes, you blot out the whole world. So what are we saying here? So the same thing is that yeshus can lead to completely losing the track. And conversely, you could be on a very high level and still be afflicted with yeshus. Because in the first, the avodah of joy, yeshus can surely be present. Because one who loves, yesh misha, one who loves retains his self-identity. By definition, love is I'm experiencing Hashem's greatness. So there's an I there. So you can think that, oh, I'm so good at experiencing Hashem's greatness, I must be special and better than the other person. One's love of Hashem can still go in the wrong direction. because the joy and excitement produced by his relationship with the divine are felt within his soul. Similarly, his love for yearning for God are intended to fill his own desire and will. He desires to be close, cling to the infinite one. That's not a bad thing, that your desire is godly rather than another cookie. But nevertheless, it's still room for yeshus. In other words, a person who's genuinely desiring to come close to Hashem and feeling close to Hashem can still have this sense that I'm better at being close to Hashem than everyone else. Self-love and self-conscious present in such a relationship, as explained elsewhere. And it's necessary to divide means to ensure that this joy and love are characterized by bittul. And this apropos of Hanukkah, this was the service of Aaron the Kohen Gadol, who kindled the lights of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. His service was intended to draw down the attribute of Chachma, which is the attribute of bittul, because Chachma is the point at which you recognize you don't know and you need new understanding. So the emotions would also be characterized by bittul, because otherwise one's knowledge and emotion, sense of closeness to Hashem, can also make you feel a sense that, that I am the center of everything and I'm close to Hashem and I'm more close than you and so on. Now, in other words, the fact that you're feeling good about being close to Hashem can sometimes lead to a sense of self-importance. Now, there's something interesting here. Which is the idea. The menorah itself, represents the seven midos, the golden menorah. The menorah stood in the temple even when it wasn't lit during the day. But the lighting of the menorah is designed that the seven midot, that the various emotions, as they exist in the temple, holy emotions, don't go beyond their boundaries. So a person can feel such a sense of closeness to Hashem again that you feel better than others, or a person can be imbued with such a sense of gevura, of judgment, that you start judging other people harshly and so on. And this is a true thing. The higher one reaches, the less, if you don't correct it, the less tolerance you have for people who fail to see what you're seeing. It's a common problem. You see the truth, so why doesn't the other person see the truth? Not realizing that person's circumstances may be very different from your own. Now, what is this idea of the menorah, of the lighting of the menorah? This was the whole idea, by the way, of the vision of the menorah that Zachariah saw. We read in the Haftorah yesterday. Because bittul comes as a result of exposure to a higher light, as explained above. The one meditates the greatness, exaltedness, and wondrous nature of the infinite one, godly light shines within his soul. So normally that should all be fine and dandy. You have to prepare yourself. In other words, because when the preparation is experiencing the delight produced by his awareness, the exaltedness and wondrous nature of the infinite one, his soul be aroused in joy, clinging to love as mentioned above. But to prevent yeshus from tainting his divine service, to achieve bittul, a different type of preparation is necessary. In other words, even in receiving Hashem's light, the primary focus can be, I want to be uplifted. I want to feel good. And rather than this sense that I am submitting myself, that by feeling Hashem's presence, I am nullifying myself to his presence. I am recognizing myself as an extension of Hashem and not something that exists for itself. Because you see this, you see sometimes that people genuinely want to feel close to Hashem. So they'll say, okay, I want to do things that I feel that make me feel good, that make me feel uplifted, but happen to be against halacha. So someone says, I want to do Berchas Kohen. It makes me feel uplifted, but you're not a Kohen. A woman says, I want an aliyah, I want to daven for the Yom, it makes me cool. I want to wear talis and tefillin. It makes me be close to Hashem. Yeah, there are certain women who wore tefillin in secret, great tzaddikim, tzadkanios. Generally speaking, the loch is they don't. So a woman comes along and says, I want to be close to Hashem. But that's about I wanting to feel that closeness, not asking, what does God demand of me? What does God require of me? What does Shulchan Aruch say? This is all part of, a person can want to be wrapped up in closeness to Hashem, but someone needs help. A famous story that Tzemach Tzedek, great Tzemach Tzedek, was going to daven, and he used to run a free loan program. So a butcher approaches him, says, I want to buy a cow to shech. Can you lend me some money? He says, okay, come to me after davening. Then he goes a few steps and he says, wait a second. This guy came early in the morning to market. My davening is important, but he needs to buy a cow right now. So he turned around and gave him the money. And then for a long time, when he wrapped himself in his talis, sometimes the Alter Rebbe would appear to him and teach him something. But he hadn't seen the Alter Rebbe for a long time. And this time he saw the Alter Rebbe when he put on his talis. So he said that I believe he told his children. I'm afraid the Rebbe tells the story that you see that helping a Jew when he needs to be helped is more important than everything, even than davening. But what's the idea? I want to be close to Hashem. I want to wrap myself in something holy, but maybe it needs your help changing a tire or something. So because that needs to be done right now, that comes first. Yeah, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing. With there are a lot of things where a person feels that something can bring them closer to Hashem, and they want to feel the light. But that's what happened to Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. They wanted to go into Holy of Holies. It's a lofty thing. But it was a little bit about, I want to feel this rather than I am going to feel Hashem's presence in order to recognize that I am one with Hashem, and therefore I have to do what Hashem wants.
Isn't this desire a double-edged sword? Because in previous chapters, we learned that when one feels like they want to be closer to Hashem, then the klippa works even harder on that person.
Right. And now, so that's the point. So where does the klippa work harder? Where does the klippa come out? It comes out in this quality of yeshus. In other words, you have the 7 bad midos. Yeah, love of things you shouldn't love, and harshness where there shouldn't be harshness, and self, and boasting, all the 7 midos, all the things. So if a person transcends those, in other words, you reach the point where we control our desires and anger and so on, and all these bad and character traits. So what happens? So where is the klipa left? The klipa is left in this realm of yeshus, because yeshus is there everywhere. Why? Because we're born with a sense of ourself, and unless you're a perfect tzaddik, you haven't got rid of it. You still have this sense of yourself, and this sense of yourself at this yeshus is the sense of the self as the yardstick. Everything is measured as the center of everything, that everything's revolving. And as long as you have that, so even if it's I want to feel close to Hashem, so as I said, as we just indicated, it can lead to things that are actually wrong. But even if it doesn't, even if my purpose in coming close to Hashem is that I want to feel that closeness, so at some level, and that's why you find that otherwise very lofty people end up in situations, which is what he's talking about here, of dissension with others. It's because if we truly got rid of the yeshus, then we would. Doesn't mean that sometimes you don't have to criticize someone. Doesn't mean sometimes you don't have to fight something negative, but there wouldn't be any personal rancor in it. So in order to receive the light properly, that it improve things and not become an obstacle, You first to sense the God light as existence itself and not merely the delight it proves. Then the godly light shines within his soul, will produce bittul. In other words, and then you experience the delight. In other words, in a sense, the idea is that you want godliness because it's godliness. If it has a nice effect and you feel good and you feel close to Hashem and all that, that's great. But the goal should be that you're connecting yourself to Hashem's light because that's the truth. That's the true reality. And I'm recognizing myself again as an extension of it. We don't ever completely get rid of a propensity for yeshus, but it depends how one prepares oneself, or if one simply is looking for the experience and inspiration. That's why the Rebbe used to tell people who are going to Eretz Yisrael that they have to take on, before you go to Eretz Yisrael, you have to take on some extra hidur, some extra care in mitzvahs, something extra in Torah mitzvahs. Why? Because you have to be a worthy vessel. A person go to Eretz Yisrael and feel very uplifted by all the holiness. But unless you make yourself a vessel, in other words, unless you're prepared that the holiness change you, so you'll feel uplifted, but there won't be any permanent results. So therefore, when you're aroused with joy and love, you'll nevertheless be permeated with a sense of bittul and self-transcendence. In other, putting yourself aside. In other words, there's, wow, look, I sense this presence of Hashem, I'm so great. Or this, I sense this presence of Hashem, and therefore it is everything. And the I that I sense is nothing because it's an extension of Hashem. The I that's important is me doing what Hashem wants, because Hashem gave me a particular shlichus, a particular mission. Now, so when a person is very uplifted, also again the other aspect is that if I'm feeling close, if I feel Hashem's closeness, but I haven't changed my yeshus, so then now I'm better than everyone else. But now the Rebbe Shab is going to say that even the act of humility can, because a person can be aware of their own humility and say, hey, the other guy doesn't have that. And the problem is that, so there's it discusses the children of Milcah and Nachor, right? So Rivka turns out okay, but everyone else represents various klipot, various negative spiritual forces, right? Because only Avram and Sarah and Rivka and so on are holy, right? The rest of the family is not holy. So it says Uma, and it's right at the end of Vayera. And his Pelegish, and her name was Reuma, right? And she gave birth to these people. So the Alter Rebbe says Reuma means see what. Ma means what am I, right? Aaron and Moshe say, what are we? It's bittul. So Reuma, if we can see your bittul. In other words, if your humility is such that you pat yourself on the back about it, even though you're genuinely humble, and that in itself will leave the yeshus unimpaired, the sense of self-importance unimpaired. In other words, yes, I recognize my shortcomings and so on, but the other guy, he recognizes his shortcomings even less. The yeshiva Novardik is one of the Musa yeshivas that focused very much on this idea of bittul, of self-abnegation. And they used to make time to sit and meditate on this. So they tell a joke, they tell a story themselves, they tell a joke that a new bacher comes to the yeshiva and he sees Thursday night everyone sitting in a corner and they're thinking about their own shortcomings and they're saying, "Ich bin garnished, I'm nothing." So the new bacher says, well, if that's what we do in the yeshiva, I'll do it too. So he sits down in a corner, he starts saying, "It's been garnished, it's been garnished." So one of the older bacher nudges another one of the older bacher, looks at him and says, He's here 5 minutes and he's already nothing. So, but in truth, that's the thing, is you can be aware of your shortcomings. You can be aware of of the need to grow, but nevertheless, you can still have the sense that I'm aware of my shortcomings and I need to grow in a unique way, and the other person doesn't have it. So it's the yeshus of, well, I'm working on myself. Are you? And it all comes again where you're the center. So then what you do is more important than others. It's like, it's like, that if you're standing on a hill, where you are, you can see every blade of grass. But the further you look from the hilltop, the smaller things seem as they get further and further away. So everything seems smaller and less important than you. And this is true even of the experience of humility. So nevertheless, the second approach, that of humility, although generally involving the negation of self, nevertheless can be tinged with yeshus. Why? Because you remain conscious of his self, even while feeling bitterness and humility. You've not gone beyond self-awareness to the point that he feels like utter nothingness, which means to say that I, in the presence of what Hashem desires in me, are not where I need to be. The brokenness is not genuine because he doesn't feel absolutely nothing. Losing his self-concern entirely, there's no sense at all. So what does this mean? We have to spend a little bit of time. Well, what does this mean, that you feel? So the answer is that you become so concerned about what you should be doing. You be so concerned about the work and where you're missing in the work that it's no longer, oh, I'm failing, I'm falling short. It's like what needs to be done. Sometimes even in the physical, we get very busy with something. We lose the sense of, what I need to do, where I need to be, what I want. You just know I got to get this thing done. And it consumes you, and your mind is totally in the getting it done rather than the sense of self. So if you're so absorbed in where you need to be and what you need to do, it becomes about what needs to be done for Hashem. In other words, yes, I'm doing the doing, but it's in what needs to be done. I'm losing the sense of, and I mean, again, a parable for this is that, most of the time we're doing our work, we're doing our household duties and so on and so forth. Well, where I'm doing this now, and I have other things I need to do, and I'm doing this because. But when you have some, when you have some crisis, I don't know, a pipe breaks, you're trying to stop the flow of water. You're not thinking, about your day and what you need to do. You're only thinking about how to stop the flood, and that's the only thing you're involved in. So too, what is it garnished? That there is, that when I recognize how much is left to do and how much I'm falling short, I get caught up in what needs to be done. So even though I'm there's garnet, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm not thinking about where I am. I'm just thinking about what needs to be done. And the Gemara in Brachas says that Rabbi Yochanan, before he died, he cried and he said, I don't know which way they're taking. Whether to the good place, the bad place. So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe asks the question, says, I don't understand, says the Rebbe. He was a great person. He never stopped learning Torah. He built up the academy in Eretz Yisrael and so on. He was the greatest of the great. Why? What is he worried about? So the answer is because he wasn't sure that there wasn't maybe some hidden negativity, some hidden shortcoming that he didn't address. So the Rebbe asked the question, so how could that be? We know that wasn't the case, but how could that be? Because he says Rabbi Yochanan was so caught up in in the avoda, in the service of what he needed to do, that it never occurred to him to sit and he sat and evaluated what he needed to do, but it didn't occur to him to sit and evaluate where he is. So even in holiness, he was so focused, his mind was so on the work that it wasn't on the him as an I as at all. So he said, I don't actually know, what my deepest self is, because he was in a state of not thinking about himself, but thinking about what needed to be done. And that's the bittul. That's what he's talking about. At garnet, how do you nothing? You're breathing, you're walking. But the garnet is that I'm not thinking about what I need to accomplish. I'm thinking about what needs to get done. So a person who's thinking of, yes, I have all these feelings, I need to do this. The I is still the center, where it becomes on what needs to be done, what I need to daven, what I need to learn, what I need to do in mitzvahs and so on. So that's the true bittul. And when one focuses in this manner, so then you avoid the yeshus. And the lack of genuine result from the fact the reckoning of thought, speech, and action described in the previous chapter does not matter. It doesn't affect the inner reaches of his soul. And again, it's interesting that he talks about thought, speech, and action. In other words, it's about the what needs to be done. So the shortcomings of what needs to be done don't reach the inner reaches of his soul, which means to say that he's still thinking about himself or herself rather than the sense of, these things need to be done and need to be done by me. So there's a difference between I need to do these things and these things need to be done by me. And that's what we're going to focus on next week, because we got to get ready for that.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care. Have a wonderful week.